Well, welcome to the city where I grew up as an architect. Um, Lorinda and I ended up here. We were both in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where we met in a recession, graduating with all the pedigree, and we couldn't find a job. I found a job at the University of Miami thanks to Andres Duani, with whom I had gone to Princeton with, and moved here, not having been here. It is to any extent. Just took the risk, and in those days that was an odd place to come. It was a sleepy southern town that became New Yorkish during the winter by the people that moved here for the season. But I'm going to tell you the run because this town changed dramatically over those years. And we happen to be here, the proverbial right place at the right time. Lorinda and I still practice together. We have 6 kids, and 2 of them are architects that work with us. I know it's unusual that many kids, but we got married when we were 24. So and I'm going to tell you not about us only because I don't want to talk too much about what we did at Arquitectonica in Miami, but there are many other people. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the history of the place. And I assume this is the press here. And maybe in between I'll pepper it with some of the work that we've done in our hometown. But how does this city start? It's 1896, I believe, or around then. Henry Flagler builds a train to go to Key West. Key West was the big city. But the train first came to Miami, and eventually he built what was one of the wonders of the world at the time, train over water, all the series of bridges all the way to Key West. But Miami was the main stop, and he built a hotel right at the mouth of the river. There was no way to get to Miami Beach. It was a coconut plantation where you're now. And soon after, that hotel became a destination for people from up north. There was a way to come down to Florida. And just so you understand, there were 2 trains, one from New York along the east coast and one from Chicago or Milwaukee all the way to the west coast of Florida. And they never met. There was the Everglades in between. So that's why until today, Northeastern Americans come here, the Midwest Americans go to the other side. But that tells you about the bridge. But eventually, Miami Beach starts its transformation. And the transformation starts when people like Mr. Collins, who were coconut farmers, started realizing that they had a place. And it was thanks to an architect. His daughter had gone to school in Boston at Harvard and met an architect, and they started thinking maybe this beautiful sand and the beaches could become a place to go. And eventually, in 1913, they built a bridge, and the bridge changed everything. And then soon after, they started building these islands in the middle of the bay with these specific shapes. You can see the bridge until today, the first bridge that came, and the islands. And these were these pill-shaped islands. They're very perfect shaped. At this point, there are other places like Dubai that do islands that have a shape, but these were islands in the middle of the bay with mansions. And the one you see there, that was Al Capone's mansion, where he came down here for vacation and built a big house. You can see how that started evolving, and how first one island to islands and then the whole city behind it. And you can see what it was and what it is today at the tip of the island. But Miami had neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods also started to change. And you can see the transformation of what is called Brickell Point in 1920, single family homes. And today, you see the point full of buildings. And some wealthy people started moving here. And one of them, the Deering Estate, the owner of the tractor company John Deere, built a mansion that was pretty interesting. You notice he built a boat made out of rock that you could cross over in a little barge, and gave parties in this rock boat. It was sort of fun. You can see it there. There was a lot of fantasy in this town, and the whole point was leaving the norm in the northeastern cities and coming to some place that was fun and to some degree surreal. And like this, there were many other buildings. There was a perception that we're going to create here some kind of a American Riviera, and therefore maybe the buildings should look like the Mediterranean. And there was sort of this Disneyland concept that this was going to become some new Mediterranean destination for Americans. And you can see buildings like this one, modeled after the Giralda of Seville. Today is a museum. And you see the Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables, same thing. Except that buildings of this height didn't exist yet in the real Mediterranean, and with swimming pools and amazing. I mean, there was famous, I don't remember her name, that danced here in the water, and it gives you an idea. And then eventually, that little piece of sand becomes the new port, and cruise lines come, and suddenly this becomes the largest cruise port in the world, going to all the Caribbean islands and the whole coast of the Caribbean. Then, of course, there's Miami Beach, and you can see the years where all this evolves. And we just heard about the Art Deco district. There was a thinking that maybe this place should be more modern. People looked at some of the Art Deco buildings in Deauville and other places in France, and thought maybe Art Deco was the next thing after Mediterranean, and always borrowing from somewhere else. And you've been here to the design district, but you see what it used to be. I mean, I'm talking to South Beach, sorry. And but you can see what it was and how it's been now restored. You see it there. That transformation has been amazing. There's a point, however, in 1947 when the government declares the Everglades Preservation Park. And that meant that we could only build in that little thin sliver of land between the ocean and the Everglades. And therefore, we are forced into densification. I mean, there's a virtue to boundaries, because if you think about the peninsula in San Francisco or Manhattan with the two rivers, and we have the equivalent. We can't go forever like Dallas or Houston or Atlanta, endless land. Here we have now a boundary, and therefore that was the beginning of that densification. And you can see the first hotels. These were originally mansions. This was a Firestone mansion on the beach that had been sold as a plot of land for a wealthy tire maker, and eventually Morris Lapidus, who was from New York. He was actually discovered because he did the display windows in Manhattan for the department stores, and he was very clever, and he created and he designed for daring person the Fontainebleau Hotel. But he had a sort of theatrical aspect to him. There was a grand stair that led to nowhere. There were the little bow ties on the floor. There were like a lot of fun, sort of curious things that he inserted in the hotel. But the hotel was very modern, this curving, bold shape on the water. And you can see that parallel at the same time, another developer builds Eden Rock. And a little bit less modern, but he had some interesting details. Look at the color of the mosaic as it rises almost like water towards the sky. And there were competing developers, and that's why you saw that eventually the developer of the Fontainebleau builds a huge second phase that blocks the sun from the Eden Rock. Similar at that same time, there's another hotel that he was doing, Morris Lapidus, the Americana Hotel, a little bit north along the beach. So you see how the beach and the edges were starting to get densified, and soon after, another hotel, the Deauville Hotel, that now has been demolished to a lot of people very upset about it. There's a new complex that is coming up there by Norman Foster. It is, but this hotel had a history because this is where the Beatles first came to the United States. Ed Sullivan did his show there. Muhammad Ali hang around there, and this hotel is no longer around, but it was part of that era, and you can see how Miami Beach was portrayed in these postcards. And but then there's a big change that happened in our city. This city was a very American place, and suddenly there's a big change in Cuba, and Cuban refugees are escaping Cuba and coming to Miami across the waters, and establishing here a whole new country. And companies from Cuba start building here, and Bacardi brings the star architect of Cuba to Miami and builds the Bacardi building on Biscayne Boulevard. It's still existing. Now it's Young Arts. And then other people start bringing in other architects, and Yamasaki does the first building, office building on Brickell Avenue, still standing there, and for the Mutual of Omaha. And like this, with the opening to the world of Miami come the Cuban districts like Little Havana. I mean, by 1971, I mean, the revolution had only been 2 years before. There is a neighborhood of Cubans that have settled here, and many of them professionals, become lawyers and doctors and developers and start developing our city. Eventually, the world wakes up to Miami. You see, this was a sand island at the mouth of the river, and a Hong Kong developer, Swire, comes to Miami and buys the island, builds a bridge, and builds a whole new city on the island. You see it between 1970, what the island was, and 2025. It is in the 70s, late 70s, we arrived here, and our firm was started in November of 1977, exactly like now. And we had designed our first house, what we call the Pink House, on the waterfront in Miami Shores. And it was now no longer Art Deco, no longer Mediterranean, but something more pure, more modern, but it's still with the whimsical aspect of the original people, architects who came here, adding color and adding some sort of unexpected things. But we included some of the materials that we did like in some of the Art Deco buildings, like the glass block that you see that is giving light yet privacy to the swimming pool. And it is, you can see here, when you enter, you discover the pool that is a lap pool. The owner wanted to swim laps, was a healthy doctor. And you see the house facing the water, very clean, very pure, very minimalist, with a composition of 6 little paintings that were abstract, some void, some glass, some solid, some, and this is how also is the first house that is of that generation of homes that were already being built, elevated to protect from hurricanes, so that we're at a flood level by the time we get to the piano nobile of the house that is elevated. But if that wasn't enough change, by 1980, there's a second wave of what's called the Mariette boat lift from Cuba. Things were getting even worse. We were now 12 years into the revolution, about that. And there's more people coming. But together with that, there's a further transformation of the city. There's a whole new energy that all this brings to the city. And it is around then, in 1981, that we opened our first high-rise. We had done a few little buildings, 6 stories, 8 stories, and we had a wonderful client from Montreal who he was great. And we built the Atlantis. Sorry, I've been on an airplane and I lost my voice. And we built the Atlantis, our first high-rise. It was 21 stories. It was boy, we were excited. In a little narrow lot, there was an existing old house. We had a mayor here who had changed the zoning from houses to multifamily. He wanted to create a real live downtown. And unlike other cities in America that were creating their business districts, like say Dallas, Houston, Denver, many other cities, Atlanta, we were creating a mixed-use downtown. He was very enlightened. He was from Puerto Rico, and he redesigned the whole zoning code to bring residences and offices and hotels and shops together, which is what is now Brickell Avenue. And this was one of the first buildings that exemplified what you could do and bring residents to downtown. And you can see we preserved the existing house off to the side to become a clubhouse. It was the original house of the explorer that discovered Machu Picchu. And it was a Tiffany house. And it was, and you can see here some of the, yeah, I need it. Sorry about that. And you can see here some of the images. We were, again, introducing color, the tropics, but we're also thinking of ourselves as environmental. The building faces south. We put a brise soleil in front. We layered it with the balconies, provided shade to the units. The building was very thin, had to resist hurricanes. So, but as a sailor, you know that if you punch a hole in the sail, it stops. And therefore we said, what if we let the wind blow through? We put that cube on the ground as if it fell off and created a central space. Think of it as a vertical city, we said. Instead of streets, we have elevators, and the city's turned on its side. It's vertical, has a main square in the middle, just like a normal city, and has a grid of streets, which is that grid that exemplifies there. At the same time, just a year later, we opened a second building, now bigger. Now we were in our late 20s, and this is a developer from New York that comes here, Harry Helmsley, the owner of Helmsley Building, the Empire State Building, and he hires us to do this 42-story building. And we thought, well, we have a site that is parallel to the water, and what if we do the units going through and we do cross ventilation, and we can actually add a whole other lifestyle feature to people who come here. They don't need air conditioning. They can open two sides. The apartment goes from one side to the other. And we competed for this project, and we came up with that idea of the multiple cores. I had seen it in South America where I grew up, and there's no invention, but it hadn't happened here. And soon after, we get retained for another project just down the street as the whole neighborhood downtown was becoming residential and office, not just office. And this is still another building in one of the thin lots along the bay. And that is when it coincides with some of the big sort of cultural changes here. One side is the entertainment side. There's a movie called Scarface, happens here in Miami, and many of our buildings are in it. And eventually, Cristo does his surrounding islands and started to bring art to the city. As you know, today is our Basel, galleries, design district, but this was the beginning of the art side of our city. He used the same pink color that you imagine flamingos to create these surrounded islands that were spectacular. The drawings are beautiful, by the way. And Miami Vice also at the same time begins. And now you're on television every week showing the city where there was a lot of turmoil with drug dealers, and it was a pretty wild place. And but you know, architects are sort of on the sidelines. We're just, but we would hear about these things happening. But in Miami Vice, the opening part is some of our work, and then the more corporate world arrives, and Gerald Hines builds the tallest office building here, designed by Skidmore and Merrill San Francisco. So architects from other places are coming here. We were so excited that it was legitimizing our city. Eventually, postmodernism takes over, and Philip Johnson designs a new public library in a more traditional way. It was, some people thought maybe this was a little bit of regression. Other people thought that we were in the mood of the world with postmodernism, but it is still existing, and it is is operating as our history museum and as our public library. And eventually, Noguchi redesigns our waterfront park. That was really the old port. We have now a new port with an amazing artwork and a famous fountain. So the city is starting to understand art, and IMP eventually builds a second of the office buildings in downtown and colors it with light at night. And it is right on the river, is more inland, so the city is becoming really mixed. It is at the same time that our firm starts doing public work, and you see here, it was our first public project, the county courthouse on Biscayne Boulevard. It had an existing sort of rock formation of coral, which we kept and designed the building around it. Of course, we were a little bit struggling with a postmodernist movement. We were not doing that, and we were not going to cave in. So we continued with our modernist style, and the county believed in us. And these were not always the best of times. We had Eastern Airlines, which was headquartered here, that goes under. So the city had its moments, like every city, and eventually in 1992 comes Andrew and wipes out the whole southern end of the city, the suburban part of the city, and that may have led to further densification of the city. This comes together with another wave from Cuba in 1994. This is the Mariel boat lift, and it was really sad, but frankly, those who came really energized the city. Eventually, it is the Art Deco district that is getting revived. Tony Goldman came from New York and Philadelphia, and so had that vision, but there was no place where to park, and cars were still a dependence in Miami Beach. There was no train. There's still no train, no public transportation. And he was being told that if he wanted to get those hotels, he needed to build a garage. And he hired us to do this garage right in the middle of the city, preserving the existing facades and building this whole new garage over the retail. And we took a completely different approach. We were not going to fight with the style of the district. Instead, we created a vertical park and concealed the garage inside. It is eventually that Craig Robbins, Miami Beach native, assembles the design district land and creates the design district. And these are the beginnings of the new high-rises. But that's a time when he assembles it, but yet still he has that vision. We started doing other buildings in Miami, and eventually we designed a new arena for the Miami Heat. We had a new basketball team. We had a practice facility. You see that wedge. You see the building itself right behind. And it is in downtown and is intended to activate downtown. Instead of going to the suburbs, to way out in the city, in other places, this is connecting to the new metro rail, connecting to the new city that is evolving in downtown, and it creates a destination on the water in the middle of the city. You can see here the arena was very raw inside, very, very nautical outside, very like a painting out of the seats in the middle. It was the beginning of our sports practice. It was the first project that we did of this kind in our hometown, of course, and you can see they're standing still. And then we did a children's museum, and eventually did the port expansion, including the new tunnel. So when you see coming to Miami Beach, that sort of element with letters that are in different classical languages about navigation is the entrance to the tunnel. And that vertical element is a guillotine that actually closes the tunnel if there is a hurricane and seals it so the water doesn't get in. And we designed the inside of the tunnel and all that. But it is here you can see then the art starting to arrive to the city, and you see what old buildings like the Moore Building became very artistic and very unique places to visit. And this is the new design district that begins first with renovations, and immediately soon after we do the first of the buildings down the street from the design district as it was completely transforming itself. It is Cesar Pelli is selected to do the new Performing Arts Center, which is, of course, they're standing. So we're down into the 2000s, and we designed a new federal courthouse in downtown Miami. And you can see the garden that Maya Lin designed for us that is actually concealing the security barriers of the courthouse. It is, you can see the internal space that is gathering, that you see it at the end of the street, where you see that cone that becomes the connecting piece that surrounds and connects all the courtrooms. And you can see here, of course, one of the courtrooms themselves. This is a federal courthouse. It was, of course, for the central government. And eventually, other buildings that are more workforce housing starting to occur. This is the river, and behind the original government building where the customs building on the river, we built the first of the additional sort of more urban core buildings, the 500 Brickell. We connect the two towers with this oculus that focuses on the pool below. And soon after, the city is growing, the downtown is growing, and finally we are designing this project with 1,800 units, a W hotel on the waterfront at the mouth of the river. So this is the new Brickell Avenue, the new downtown. People are going to hotels, going to new office buildings like the ones I showed you by IMP and SOM, and now there's a place to live, and walk to work, there's a place to stay in the middle of the city. You see the mega pool that goes through the building, creating almost like a canal that the units that face the inside court look into. And at the same time, the city is still struggling with unfortunate dependence on the car, and Miami Beach needs still another garage. And Hertz and DeMuron designed this garage at the entrance to Lincoln Road. You can see it down the street. It has a house for the owner on top, by the way. It's like a geography to put the house with a view. It is, but they turned the garage into a piece of art, and it was really a way of camouflaging the reality that we need to drive there. And but there are events in that garage. It's like really an interesting building, and we start doing some of our first education buildings. This is the School for International Studies at Florida International University. Auditorium to the left, the classrooms to the right, the lobby in the middle, and we had to let the path go. So you see the bicycle that actually slides under the cantilevered auditorium. This is west of downtown, by the way, and we do the next Performing Arts Center also in the south end of town. That has been the magnet for a whole neighborhood that didn't have any culture. The county was really dead set in creating a cultural atmosphere in the city. You can see Lorinda designed this, the curtains and that sort of interesting sort of painting of the stage. And you see that the art piece, that it becomes the wall that leads to the upper levels of the place. And Hertz and DeMuron are back and designed a new museum on the waterfront. And a beautiful building that is just a series of columns holding a trellis under which, hidden behind the greenery, is the actual museum. The overhangs are protecting everything from the sun. It creates a very pleasant porch along the beach. And we start continuing to work in the universities, and we do the new bridge and the new student center for the University of Miami. It is eventually that Craig Robbins is taking off with the design district. He's bringing all the famous restaurants and shops. You should visit. It's really fantastic because he had every store designed by a different architect. It's like a real town of architecture. And every one of the design shops is like a townhouse, and it's not a mall, it's a street, which is fantastic. And he found somewhere this Buckminster Fuller dome. I wish I would have found it. And he put it in the main square. And you can go into it, you can go down to the parking or something underneath. Is really beautiful, sitting in one of the courtyards. And you can see what happens in the design district. It is a really unique place. There's amazing art, Even the garages, I'm going to show you, these are garages, the proverbial garage that we have to live with here. Remember, we cannot excavate because we hit water. So the garage has to go up because the water table is right there between the Everglades and the ocean, of course. And you can see these are garages, and they're really amazing pieces of art that are peppered in between other buildings. And it is in the design district. And we continue and we do our first, one of our more super luxury, I hate the word, building with a single apartment per floor in a very small plot on the ocean here. And it is, these are one apartment per floor, like houses. There's some famous people that live there, artists, etc. But we continue with our practice of the simpler buildings, the simple rectangle that is given some life by the balconies. You can see this is one happening in a whole new neighborhood was emerging, some lost neighborhood that was also rezoned. We needed to find housing, and there was no place to build because of the boundaries of the city. So we start verticalizing, and we become part of that movement. As others, this is Norman Foster in his building at Faena House, and eventually the world starts, the developer, in this case Swire again from Hong Kong, realizes they've built all these buildings and there's no place to shop. There's no central main street. We're asked to do a mall. But I remember my mother coming to Miami to visit with a sweater. Everything was freezing, air conditioning. So I was decided to do a retail place without air conditioning. And we went through all kinds of studies. We studied what is called the trade winds, the winds that come from the southeast, how to harness those winds, let them slide into the shopping center and create the first of this kind, covered, rain protected, sun protected, collects the water for a 10-acre park on the roof, and it is no air conditioning, and you can go to the shops, 3 levels, theaters, restaurants, everything without a main entrance. You can filter from the streets. We were originally told we can close the streets. We left the streets where they were. We bridge across, go under, go over, and the river, the roof also connects over the streets and connects all these levels. And on top of that, we put hotels, residential, office, everything on the 10-acre park that is the roof of this shopping complex. It is right there on Brickell Avenue. You can see here the roof and the bridge crossing the street from one side to the other. The buildings populating the roof with swimming pools crossing under buildings. There's everything happening here, coexisting. It is soon after also that other international architects are coming. We welcome them. We're so pleased that they're here. And eventually BIG does a building in Coconut Grove that is 2 residential towers. These are, of course, very luxury towers. It is on the marina in Coconut Grove. And eventually the Science Center is built. Grimshaw designed it as well, right next to the Hertz of the Muron building. And we continue to do other buildings in the residential side as well as the public side. This is the new Fendi building in Miami Beach, smaller scale, 12 stories, sort of soft against the sand. And we take a part in the renovation of this convention center. It was very old, it was very decrepit and past. And I'm gonna end here with a few slides of other things that you can see some numbers are appearing. Are you able to? Oh yeah, okay. It is, and then other neighborhoods start with little buildings like Cipriani's new hotel in Coconut Grove, just 100 keys. And eventually Zaha Hadid does her big splash in Miami with this new tower right in the downtown, in a neighborhood that is emerging. Zaha Hadid designs this building. You can see it standing directly across from the museum. It's called Museum Tower, of course, and it was fantastic. It's unfortunate she dies here in Miami while coming to visit this project. It is, then after the arena, we redid, we added a roof and modernized and transformed the Miami Dolphin Stadium. Generally, they're all circular. This one, we made it a perfect square that floats over the original, completely redesigned Stadium Bowl. And for the Miami Dolphins, is a larger facility, of course, is 75,000 seats. But we continue Miami continues to attract other architects. There's Renzo Piano, a building on the ocean here at the north end of Miami Beach, with the biggest cantilevers, terraces with beautiful outdoor space. But then we suddenly get COVID, and COVID does affect our city because half of them, North America, starts moving here. Canadians, New Yorkers, because of the weather, they can be outdoors, and they love it, and they decide to stay. So we have a whole generation of buildings of this sort of transformative moment. We first had already started doing these new high-rises, but this is the new Ritz-Carlton in Sunny Isles, and and now suddenly there's a whole new generation of population, young and old, all ages, that started to move to Florida, which probably explains why, and that affects even the university. University then is in dire need of housing for students, and we built this first of the several facilities that we have designed for them. This is about 1,200 beds at the University of Miami, and you can see here some of the spaces, but we continue to build high-rises, and you can see in very small sites, we don't have room because of that narrow zone where we can build. And you can see how the small apartments open up space for the pool. They become larger and even larger to the top. And this telescoping building is right here in a whole new neighborhood called Edgewater that is now the emerging neighborhood of the city north of downtown. It is during that period that a neighborhood of warehouses is becoming an interesting place to go. And the warehouses start to get redeveloped. And part of the redevelopment is street art. And you can see the art that emerged in this neighborhood as young artists are painting buildings. And it's a hopping place now. If you go with bars, restaurants, it's a whole other new neighborhood. The city is starting to be a real city when there's different neighborhoods. There's Brooklyn, there's Soho, there's Upper East Side, there's Midtown in New York. They have variety, where we now have variety as well. And it is soon after that we started doing housing in that neighborhood. Sorry. And you can see the neighborhood is starting to change. And this is young housing, rentals, places, and the port is growing. And Richard Branson calls us to design his new terminal in the port. And you can see the view of the terminal. It's almost like a canopy of trees, totally abstracted. You slide under those crooked columns and that wiggling roof with light coming in between the holes to go to your cruise. And this is the Virgin terminal in the port. And we consider ourselves responsible, and we do for affordable housing. And this is one of I want you to know we do a lot of this affordable housing. This is a new building on the train station with under construction 2 more. This is when the county says we gotta use mass transit, we gotta stop this car thing, and gives new zoning anywhere next to the metro rail station. And this is the first of those developments where a 43-story building happens where everything was 8 stories you see next door. And now suddenly these sites are opening up, and there's new buildings happening that these are rentals for much more affordable, so that not everything is luxury. And we continue to build in that other sector, these other buildings, but often we're proposing to the city, for example here, give us height and we'll give a park. There was no park in this neighborhood. We surveyed all the neighborhood and here in Miami Beach, and we explained how can we do a high rise and create a new park for the city. And our group designed this new park that has all kinds of activities for the neighborhood, and it was a way of trading off a public benefit of a park. I'm gonna have to hurry up and finish, but this is the next terminal that we've done for MSC. And it's for MSC that we do terminals and the destination islands in the Caribbean. I'm gonna finish with my favorite project. This is the new architecture studio for the University of Miami. It is This is where the students of all ages gather. We wanted to teach them through architecture and to the building that they go to. This is the west side where there's a curve that creates a potential sort of little amphitheater. The roof is overhanging on the south side to protect from the sun, not overhanging on the north side. You see the book and the paper. The sun is coming from the southwest in the afternoon, so we tilted that corner and let it sort of hang down in the corner to create what is a very simple rectangular glass box. There's a little cafecito window. There's a little coffee cube that you see on the right to serve coffee for the students. They use it for crits. It's always shaded and with a beautiful weather. Sorry for the winter day that we're having yesterday and today. It is unusually cold here. It is, you can see how we studied the sun. We did operable windows so that you can open the studio during the good weather like today and let the air flow from one side to the other of the building. And it's frankly our favorite project above all the skyscrapers that we do. With this I finish because, and you see out the window and you see under construction the new Holocaust Education Center. It'll have holographic presentations. It'll be amazing, I hope. And it's underway right next to that convention center. And some of these small projects offer a lot of opportunity to think other ideas. And each one of those cylinders is a different room where you experience something completely different. And I think that there's a lot more coming in Miami. You can see these are some of the buildings that we're involved in the city. But I want to point out not just the new soccer stadium, but the big image in the middle, that is 3,000 units of affordable housing. We have a big practice in that field of affordable housing. The one on the right with that swimming pool, those are 5,800 units of affordable housing. The window, the missing gap here is that affordable housing. Of course, there's luxury projects. You can see them below, the St. Regis, the Baccarat, whatever. But, and you can see in the skyline, the new tower that is rising that we're doing on the left-hand side and on Brickell Avenue. But these two projects are very important game changers in the city because they're creating a whole new village with shops, grocery stores, and nice laid out apartments with terraces, with amenities like others are able to have. And we're giving it back to also in these big neighborhoods, thanks to the sponsorship of the county, who has very good leadership here. Thank you very much. I think that's where I stand.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I think we couldn't have had a better introduction on our theme of hearts and minds, because this is extraordinary work, which is clearly modern, but on the other hand, the use of color. I remember when that TV series, Miami Vice, was starting, people really couldn't believe the architecture they were seeing and the color and the building with the hole in it. A great supporter of World Architecture Festival, last no longer with us, Bill Menking, a teacher and founder of Architects newspaper, actually worked as art director on Miami Vice. And he actually stayed in one of your buildings, and he showed us around it a few years ago. I only have a couple of questions. One is, when you're working in other cities and other continents, because you're in China, you're in Europe, you're in the Middle East, do you see your role almost as a kind of mission to take Miami architecture and the kind of vibe that you've created here and try to do something similar there? Or on the other hand, do you kind of approach those locations and try and think, well, we could apply our kind of analysis and feelings about Miami, but they will be different because it's a different city?
Well, the last part of your explanation is the correct one. Yes, I'm often under pressure to give me some Miami here. and I have to always tell them, no, no, no. Every place is different. And actually, when I travel to other places, I prepare myself. I read about the culture of the place. Often arrive a little bit early to visit if it's a new place, and I have to explain that I'll do the interpretation that we did in Miami for you in your location. So no, we wouldn't do what's so-called Miami building, but we would do something that has that approach, of how to go to the next step and not simulate what has been done already.
I must say I can think of quite a few cities in Britain that would benefit from a Miami building, because they do inject a shot of excitement, as your presentation showed. Another question I had was the Lorinda Spear, who co-founded Arquitectonica with you and will be one of our jurors on Friday here, I think had a background in landscape. Now the practice Arquitectonica Geo that you've created, it did strike me that in a way the use of natural materials on that kind of heart and mind thing. The mind is the built object, the man-made, the artificial. And what you've done by incorporating landscape actually into the buildings, not just simply around them, is another attempt to do this kind of synthesis of two different things. And I wonder how far that's kind of pushing the work at the moment. I mean, would you always seek the opportunities to incorporate nature, or just when it's particularly appropriate or easy?
Well, we were originally frustrated that there was a line of demarcation between building and the environment around it. And we wanted to blur that line. And we wanted to, yes, bring architecture into the landscape and landscape into the building, or at least the two have a conversation. And it was a real struggle when we first started practicing, because always there was a very clear divide, and we try to avoid that. And when we're lucky that the client agrees, we end up doing everything around, like in the park here. We did the building, we did the park, and in many other buildings, we bring that greenery into the building in some way.
Because I think with Miami's, occasional hurricane conditions, this is not a simple question of, well, you could do landscape here like you could do in, London or more temperate climates. I mean, there are particular design challenges about which plants you use and how to do these incorporations.
Well, there's many factors. One of them is that we use native plants, and we use native plants wherever we go, in Mexico or whatever, Saudi Arabia. I mean, depends on where we're practicing. But it's important to not import a plant that is not logical to the place. And those plants have historically resisted. That's why they're still around. Another factor is irrigation, because irrigation is quite expensive. Actually, it's very unsustainable. If you're putting plants that you have to pump water up into somewhere in the building, you have to put fertilizer that pollutes, you put pesticides, the plant is not normal to grow in that place. Under the normal conditions, atmospheric conditions, it shouldn't be there. And because otherwise, you're creating an artificial effort to sustain that plant. And we try to be very careful in that respect. And we selectively put plants in buildings for that reason, because it is a factor on how they're going to be maintained. But remember, in certain places, like here, we have to be mindful of water retention also, because if there's a major, sometimes in the summer we get at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a big pour water downpour, and we need to figure out how to control the ponding. And when we have big storms, we have figured out a way to incorporate a manner in which we retain the water and not flood the streets.
I think it's a lovely note to end on, actually, because I think that the sort of joy of incorporating nature into buildings is it's not simply a matter of doing something which is nice. You have to apply the same kind of architectural rigor and thinking about, well, what will we be using and why, and how's it going to operate if it's 50 stories up? I mean, what's possible to use? And I think in a way that's a kind of sort of reading between the lines of your presentation. It seemed to me that all the things that we would regard as it were, the heart and the emotional and the joyful aspects of the architecture are nevertheless the product of serious and rigorous thinking. Great way to start our conference session this year, Bernardo Fort-Brescia. Thank you very much indeed.